I knew something was wrong the moment I saw the animal control van pull up in front of my house. The officer walked up my driveway with a clipboard in hand and a serious expression on his face. Duke, my German Shepherd, sat perfectly still beside me on the porch, his K9 vest gleaming in the afternoon sun. The officer stopped mid-stride when he saw the official badge on Duke's collar, his entire demeanor shifting from authoritative to apologetic. In seconds, sir, I'm responding to multiple complaints about a dangerous and aggressive dog at this address, he said, glancing between Duke and me with obvious confusion. But I can see that's clearly not the case here. Duke remained motionless, his years of training evident in every muscle. The officer's eyes widened as he took in the service patches on Duke's vest, the federal identification tags, and the calm professionalism of a dog who'd spent 8 years serving our community. Let me guess, I said, already knowing the answer. Karen Richardson filed these complaints. The officer's uncomfortable silence told me everything I needed to know. My name is James Harrison and I'm a retired police officer who moved to Maplewood Estate 6 months ago with my partner Duke, not my romantic partner mind you, but my four-legged one who'd served alongside me for the better part of a decade. Duke wasn't just any dog, he was a decorated K9 officer with more commendations than most human officers accumulate in their entire careers. We tracked down missing children, helped take dangerous criminals off the streets, and saved more lives than I could count. When I retired early due to a knee injury, the department agreed to let me adopt Duke at 12 years old. He'd earned his retirement too. We chose Maplewood Estates because it seemed like a quiet suburban neighborhood where we could both enjoy some peace. What I hadn't counted on was Karen Richardson, the HOA president who ruled our little community with an iron fist wrapped in a pastel cardigan from day one. Karen had issues with Duke despite the fact that he was better trained than most people's children. She insisted that large dogs were inherently menacing and had no place in a family neighborhood. Never mind that Duke spent most of his days sleeping on the couch or gently playing with the neighborhood kids who adored him. The problem started small. Karen would make snide comments whenever she saw us on our morning walks. She dramatically crossed the street clutching her tiny Pomeranian named Princess as if Duke was some kind of monster. Duke, for his part, completely ignored both of them, far more interested in maintaining his perfect heel position than acknowledging their existence. Then came the formal complaints. The first one claimed Duke had been barking aggressively at all hours of the night. This was particularly amusing since Duke rarely barked at all, a trait trained into police dogs who needed to work silently. My security cameras showed Duke sleeping soundly in his bed during the alleged barking incidents. The second complaint accused Duke of chasing children in the park. Again, my neighbor Tom had video footage from that exact day showing Duke lying calmly under a tree while kids played fetch with him, taking turns throwing his tennis ball. The same kids whose parents had thanked me for bringing such a gentle giant into their lives. But Karen wasn't deterred by facts. She started photographing Duke from behind bushes and trees, sometimes standing at the edge of my property for 20 minutes at a time. I have footage of her trying to provoke him by making sudden movements and loud noises, but Duke just watched her with a patient expression of a professional who dealt with far more threatening individuals. Everything came to a head last Tuesday at the community mailboxes. I was collecting my mail when Karen marched up, her face red with indignation. Princess yapped incessantly from her rhinestone-studded carrier. "That beast of yours has got to go," she announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "This is a family neighborhood, not a training ground for attack dogs." "Duke is a retired police K9, I replied calmly, continuing to sort through my mail. "He served this community for 8 years. I don't care if he served the Queen of England." Karen spat back. "Large aggressive breeds have no place here. The HOA rules clearly state that pets must not pose a threat to residents." Duke, who had been sitting quietly beside me, yawned. It was probably the most aggressive thing he'd done all month. "Duke has never shown aggression toward anyone in this neighborhood," I pointed out. "In fact, he's been nothing but gentle with everyone he's met." Karen's eyes narrowed dangerously. "We'll see about that. I've documented everything and I'm taking this to the authorities. Animal control will deal with your so-called police dog. Maybe they'll see what a menace he really is." She stormed off in a cloud of excessive perfume, leaving me to wonder just how far she was willing to take this vendetta. I found out 3 days later when the animal control van appeared at my door. The officer whose badge Red Williams seemed genuinely embarrassed as he explained the situation. According to the complaints filed by Karen, Duke was a vicious animal who terrorized the neighborhood, chased residents, and showed aggressive behavior toward other pets. "I need to see the dog's licensing and vaccination records," Officer Williams said apologetically, "and I'll need to do a behavioral assessment." "Of course," I replied, inviting him inside. "Let me get Duke's paperwork." I returned with a folder that was probably thicker than most people's tax returns. Officer Williams' eyes widened as I laid out Duke's federal K-9 certification, his service record, photographs from medal ceremonies, commendations from the chief of police, and even a letter from the mayor thanking Duke for his role in finding a kidnapped child 2 years ago. This is Officer Williams paused, flipping through the documents. This is incredible. This dog has more official recognition than most human officers. Duke sat perfectly still throughout the examination, responding to basic commands with military precision. When Officer Williams tossed a ball to test his temperament, Duke looked at me for permission before gently retrieving it. Someone filed a false report on a government service animal, Officer Williams said, his tone shifting from apologetic to angry. That's a serious offense. Making false claims about a K-9 officer could result in criminal charges. I glanced out the window to see Karen watching from her driveway, no doubt expecting to see Duke being led away in the animal control van. Instead, she was about to learn a very expensive lesson about filing false reports. Officer Williams made several phone calls from his van, and within an hour 2 police cruisers pulled up to the house. I knew both officers from my years on the force, and they were not happy about the situation. Making false reports about a fellow officer, even a four-legged one, was taken very seriously by the department. We need to have a word with the complainant. Officer Bradley said, reviewing the animal control report. Filing false reports is a misdemeanor, and when it involves harassment of a service animal and retired officer, we take it very seriously. They walked across the street to Karen's house, where she answered the door with a smug smile that quickly faded when she saw the uniforms. I couldn't hear the conversation from my porch, but I could see her animated gestures and the officer's stern expressions. She kept pointing at my house and shaking her head, clearly trying to talk her way out of trouble. That's when Officer Bradley pulled out his tablet and showed her something on the screen, the security footage. I realized I'd provided Officer Williams with weeks of video showing Karen's harassment, her attempts to provoke Duke, and clear evidence that every single complaint she'd filed was fabricated. The color drained from Karen's face as she watched herself on camera sneaking around my property, making loud noises to try to startle Duke, and even throwing small objects over my fence. The footage also showed Duke's complete lack of response to her provocations, lying calmly on his bed or continuing his patrol of the yard without so much as a bark. Officer Bradley handed her several documents, which I later learned included a citation for filing false reports, a cease and desist order for harassment, and notice of a substantial fine. The fine for filing false reports about a service animal was $5,000, and that didn't include potential civil penalties if I chose to pursue them. Karen's shrill voice carried across the street as she protested, claiming she was just looking out for the neighborhood's safety, but the evidence was overwhelming and the officers weren't interested in her excuses. They informed her that any further harassment would result in criminal charges and possible jail time. As the police prepared to leave, word had already begun spreading through the neighborhood. Several residents had witnessed the confrontation, and in a community like ours, news traveled faster than Duke chasing a tennis ball. By evening, everyone knew that their HOA president had filed false reports against a decorated police dog. The special HOA meeting was called for the following Thursday. Karen tried to control the narrative, claiming she'd been acting in the community's best interests, but the damage was done. One by one, neighbors stood up to defend Duke and share their positive experiences with him. Tom showed videos of Duke playing gently with his twin toddlers. Sarah talked about how Duke had alerted her when her father, who had dementia, had wandered from her house. Even cranky old Mr. Peterson admitted that Duke was the best behaved dog he'd ever encountered. The final blow came when Maria Gonzalez, whose daughter had been the kidnapped child Duke helped find 2 years ago, stood up. She'd driven an hour to attend the meeting. After hearing about the situation, with tears in her eyes, she told the room how Duke had tracked her daughter through woods and rain for 16 hours straight, never giving up until he found her hiding scared but unharmed in an abandoned cabin. This dog is a hero, Maria said, her voice shaking with emotion, and anyone who tries to harm him should be ashamed of themselves. The room erupted in applause and several people turned to look at Karen with open disgust. Duke, who had been lying quietly at my feet throughout the meeting, accepted the praise with typical professional dignity, though his tail did wag slightly when Maria bent down to hug him. The vote to remove Karen from her position as HOA president was unanimous except for Karen's own vote. She sat frozen in her chair as the results were announced, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The $5,000 fine from the city was bad enough, but losing her position of power in the neighborhood was clearly the bigger blow to her ego. This is ridiculous, she finally managed to sputter, gathering her papers with shaking hands. I was protecting this community. But no one was listening anymore. As she stormed out of the community center, someone started clapping. Soon the entire room gave Duke a standing ovation. He stood up, tail wagging properly now, and did a little bow that I'd taught him years ago. The retired K-9 officer who'd been falsely accused of being a menace was now officially the neighborhood hero, and Karen's reputation as the local busybody with too much time on her hands was sealed forever.